Hello, my name is Mara and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So, we have come to the end of June. I think by the time you guys are seeing this, we are pretty well into July. And yeah, I just wanted to do my monthly wrap up for you guys, letting you know some of the hits, surprises, and disappointments I had for the month of June. Overall, it was a really good month. I kind of had a little self-talk about it being okay for me to slow down on reading and not try to just gulp things up. I think I've been feeling a little overwhelmed by the volume of my TBR and some arcs I need to get to and some buddy reading and like the timing of library things. So one thing I've decided is that I'm not putting things on hold very much at the library anymore because I'm such a mood reader that by the time things come available for me at the library, I'm often not in the mood to read it anymore, and it makes me feel overwhelmed because I'm like, oh, I need to get to it, but I'm not that excited to get to it anymore. So except for a few special releases, like I'll point out one example of that. I think if it's available at the library, I'll grab it if I'm in the mood for it, but otherwise I think I'm going to cool my jets a little bit there. And I'm also not going to request any more arcs. I do have, I think, about 10 I still need to get to this year, but for now I think I'm going to leave it at that and then maybe pick things up in the fall or something like that, requesting things for winter. So I think those were good decisions, and I'm also like, you want to make sure you're giving yourself time to write. I'm going to start doing some volunteer work. I want to make sure I'm giving space to other things in my life. So anyway, all that to say, I still read 20 books this month, so it's not like I'm not reading, but I think I'm just trying to be a little bit more deliberate with some of my downtime. So anyway, let's start with some stats, and then we will get into my hits, surprises, and disappointments. Okay, so this month, like I said, I read 20 books. 17 of those were off of my TBR, which was great, because like I said, I think I've been feeling a little overwhelmed in that respect. So got to about 17 of those, and then I did read 3 library books because like I said, I sort of calmed down a little bit on library requests. In terms of breakdown, in terms of format, I did have 3 audiobooks, 4 physical, but mostly ebooks this month. I had a pretty good variety of things I was reading, so a lot of the kind of standard things you guys see me reading, so mystery, memoir, romance, nonfiction, genre blends, short stories, like more literary fiction is usually what those are. Yeah, I mean, pretty typical mix for me. I've got slightly different stats over here in the other column, so I always do my total pages, which this month was 6,094 with an average page count of 305. I added an average age of the book just because I thought that might be interesting, so this month it was 9 years old was the average age. I think that was pulled down by the Poirot book I read this month. The average time these books have been on my TBR was 163 days, which is actually pretty good. That means that I'm getting to things in, what would that be, about 5 or 6 months. So yeah, for me, that's actually not bad. And an average rating of 3.5, which for me means above my expectations, but not quite excellent. It's a new star that I've added recently. And it's one that I use when I'm like, okay, this was better than I thought it was going to be, but I still wouldn't say it's great. So if that's my average, that's really good, because as long as something is 3 stars, I consider that a win. And then, yeah, in terms of the actual breakdowns, as you can see, I had 3 4.5 star books, which is great because those are ones I consider to be favorites of the year. So 3 in 1 month, doing good. And most of them clustered around 4 and 3.5 stars. I did have 1 1-star book, which would be a DNF for me. So with all that said, let's dive into the specific books I want to talk about. Okay, so let's start with the hit that I had that is in physical form, which was Dread Nation. I actually went ahead and did an entire yay or nay review on this, talking a little bit about why I love this book so much. But this is really, I would say this is the best YA I've read so far this year. I really enjoyed it. I think even if you don't end up loving it, it's something that you will have a reaction to, and for that reason, I would recommend this to pretty much anyone. But yeah, I'll link my review of this in case you want to hear more thoughts from me on this, but I really enjoyed this book, and I'm looking forward to continuing in the series. My next hit was an audiobook that I own, so I can't show it to you, but it's in my Audible account, and that was The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung. I think I talked about this on Insta Stories, but basically I really love this book, and I think I would say it is now the book that I would recommend starting with for anybody interested in Keto, yes, but it's not a book about keto. I would recommend it more for anybody who really wants to kind of like get serious about eliminating sugar or processed foods from your diet, just because I think that this is probably the most accessible explanation of how your body handles food on a chemical and hormonal level. And the reason it's called the Obesity Code is because really, instead of thinking about just like calories or points or whatever, he's really kind of giving you the tools to think through like, okay, things I put into my mouth are fuel and they will react to in my body in different ways based on what is in that fuel. So I honestly think that understanding that, at least for me, okay, so maybe I should just say I'm somebody who really needs to understand the history of things and the how of things to really like change the way that I think and therefore act. And I think that this was a great book for that. So if you're somebody who needs to kind of understand at that level how things work, I think that this could be a really good way to kind of understand some of that and understand just like how your body is working at that level. And I like I said, I think it's a pretty accessible book, even though it does talk about science at a pretty detailed level. I think it does it in a way that is pretty user-friendly. So definitely recommend that, and I thought it worked well as audio, by the way. Oh, and I will, because I get this question often, I will do a video on books for keto. I'm gonna wait until the fall because I still have some books that I need to read for that, because I want to make sure I've done a reasonable survey of the most kind of like prevalent keto literature out there so that I can give you the best recommendations that I can. And then the third hit I had was the last book I read this month, and that was Shrill by Lindy West. Now, I had this book as an ebook, but I saw that it was available on audio from my library, so I jumped on that and was like, okay, this will be a good way to consume this, especially since she narrated it. And I really enjoyed that book. I wasn't sure when I was first getting into it. I was like, okay, I think this is probably will end up being like a 4-star read. This is good. I'm really enjoying it. But as it went on, I just was resonating so much with what she had to say. I think the fact that I was listening to her narrate probably helped because I really enjoyed hearing her voice. But it made me realize she's just been a really, I think, important figure in the last few years in terms of like being a woman online and taking a lot of shit for it and kind of facilitating, I think, really important conversations. So I think as I was listening to her talk about specific issues and reading from some of her work, it just made me love it more and more. And it also just made me so I think I mentioned this in my Q&A video for my 1,000 subscriber thing that I write sometimes. And one of the things I've been writing as I've been losing weight over the last 8 or 9 months is just some like thoughts and essays about like what that process has been like and like how it's made me think about like being fat differently and like how I treat others and whatever. And she had so many little lines in this that I was just like, well, I wrote that, but good to know that she already has done it. So I'm glad that I read it because A, that I'm not being original, but B, it's just good to hear that like your experience reflected back to you. So I think I resonated with a lot of what she had to say about what it means to be fat, what it means to be a fat woman, and what it means to be a fat woman in Western society, and how that has translated to being online in our culture. So I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. So all 3 of those hits were all 3 books I gave 4.5 stars to, meaning they were like some of the best books I've read this year. So yeah, a really good month in terms of things I loved. And then I've got 3 books that I counted as surprises this month, and all 3 of these are books I gave 4 stars to. So none of these are bad books. It's just they were surprising to me in one way or another. So I'll start with one that I think I already mentioned in my What I'm Reading Right Now video, so I won't get too into it, but Shelter in Place by Nora Roberts. So Nora Roberts every year releases a standalone romantic suspense, and they're really, I think, solid, like fun commercial fiction. They do have some, like they have a suspense element, they have a romance element, they have usually like a small town or like a community or family element to them. So there's a lot of sort of like interpersonal dynamics in those books. I just think they're really fun. They're really well written for what they are, which, by the way, for what they are is books that people enjoy reading. And so like that is, people like Nora Roberts, I think, get a lot of shit just because they sell a lot of books, and there is some really badly written commercial fiction, cough, James Patterson, cough. There's some really badly written commercial fiction out there, so I get that it's not all super high quality, but like, it is hard to write clear prose, compelling characters, and interesting plots. And Nora Roberts is one of those commercial fiction authors who I think does a really good job of that and deserves more respect than I think she gets from from readers or from or reviewers, whoever. It's like, there's a reason she sells so many books. In this case, it's because she knows how to write things people enjoy reading, and she's able to do it in a way that I think is actually really competent and deserves to be praised. So anyway, that's my side note about, we need to show people who write commercial fiction, I think, more respect than we do as a book community, because it's not easy. Shelter in Place was surprising to me, though, just because it is supposed to be a romantic suspense, and for the last 2 years, I really think Nora Roberts has just like lost interest in writing the romance piece, which is fine, but I kind of now wish she would leave it out of her books, because her suspense books would work just fine if there was like a kind of cursory romance, but like it wasn't a main focus. And I kind of wish she would do that, because it doesn't seem like she has a lot of energy for that part of the book, and it ends up feeling a little tacked on to everything else that's going on. So that's a side note, but I was surprised because I thought she handled, so the backdrop of this story is that it's following the survivors of like what is supposed to be like the worst mass shooting in US history. Again, I say it every time this comes up, but it is very sad to me that that is a plausible and now frequent backdrop to books. Like, I've read several books this year with that premise, and I'm about to read one more, actually 2 more. So woe betide us in terms of where we are as a culture and as a country. But anyway, I thought she handled that really nicely with a lot of grace. I didn't feel like she was fetishizing the victims or the shooters. I thought she did a really nice job of sort of exploring what that might do to somebody's life to have survived that, and to have people who you knew and loved who didn't survive. So I thought that she handled that really well. I liked the suspense aspect. I thought it worked really well as a book, basically, is what I'm saying. But it's surprising. She continues to surprise me in terms of what she is or isn't interested in her books, and how she, I think, is sort of, I wonder if she's sort of feeling constrained by kind of her history of being a romance author, and is wanting to just sort of like leave that behind and write straight suspense. And I think she should just do that, because I think if she's not interested in the romance, it doesn't feel as integrated into the book. So Nora, if you're watching, I give you permission. I think a lot of your readers would be fine if you just left that part out and just focused on the suspense. My next surprise was Curtain by Agatha Christie. My review of Curtain will be up next Friday, which is 13th, I believe. And it will be a full-on spoiler review. It's like a half-hour long. I have a lot to say about it. So I won't say much here. I'll just say I think I was surprised. The reason I'm putting it on here, I was surprised by how much I really did end up loving this book. I've heard really mixed opinions on it over the years. Some people really love it, some people really hate it, and I ended up being in the camp that really loved this book in a lot of ways. It's definitely not a perfect book, and I had some suggestions of how I think she should have handled things in terms of ending, kind of some of the timing stuff, but you know, far be it from me to criticize Agatha Christie too much. So anyway, just all that to say, I was surprised by how much I really enjoyed that book, and if you want to hear my full spoilery thoughts, that will be coming next week. And then my third surprise was From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. Now, Mariana Zapata is a contemporary romance author who I really enjoy. She's an indie author, so she does all of her own self-publishing, and I think I've enjoyed, I found her, when did I find her? I think during the Winnipeg and Me phenomenon. So that was a book of hers that really blew up, and it is just a really great, probably my favorite sports contemporary romance. All of her stuff is what are called slow burns, meaning that the hero and the heroine don't get together until really late in the book, and there's only, I mean, they're usually like 500-page books, and the hero and heroine are usually only together for maybe the equivalent of 30 to 50 pages. There's usually only 1 or 2 sex scenes, which for a contemporary is kind of unusual. And they take, you spend a lot of time watching these two people kind of dance around each other. There's always a lot of other things happening with like work and family. So it ends up actually, I guess, kind of straddling the line in some ways between just like contemporary fiction and romance. I guess you really probably could say this is women's fiction with a very strong romantic element in it. But anyway, I really enjoy her books, and I've enjoyed watching her grow as a writer because she is self-published and she, you know, has to do her own editing and everything. So I have some patience for, you know, some grammar stuff and some idiosyncratic elements to her writing. Like, I have patience for that. So I've really enjoyed kind of watching her grow as I read through her whole backlist, because I think at this point she probably has about 8 books. So I'm caught up. I've read them all now. And you can definitely see a huge growth in her ability to write well and to eliminate some of the superfluous stuff as time goes on. So I've been really, like, proud is kind of a weird word, but it's been fun to see her growing as a writer, growing as an editor, or getting better editors. Like, they've been getting better. But this was a book that I didn't quite know how to respond to. So I gave it 4 stars. On reflection, it maybe is more like a 3.5 because it is better written than some of her past books. But what this book I feel like kind of lacked was a very good romantic element. Even though a lot of the like pieces of what I like about her romances are there, I was very uninterested in the romance for the most part, and very interested in the heroine's journey to kind of like find herself in her profession again. So she's a professional figure skater, and this is sort of like a winter Olympic-y type book, because this came out, I believe, in February. So well timed on Mariana Zapata's thinking. But she's a professional figure skater, and she's kind of like, she lost her partner. She's a partner skater, and so she thinks basically this might be it for her. She's had one season where she didn't have a partner, and she's thinking she's never going to get one again. And the hero is somebody who she's trained with at the same ice skating arena for a really long time. She's really good friends with his sister, and he's like the best male pairs skater in the world, and he asks her to be his partner because his partner isn't going to be around for the season. So you know, in theory, I should really like this, because they're sort of not quite enemies to lovers, but sort of like they have some bickering history, and she thinks he really doesn't like her. And, you know, spoilers, but not really, because it's a romance. Like, he's always really liked her, but he just has never really known how to talk to her about that. So it's about them coming together, but I really just loved her regaining her confidence as a woman, as a skater, her refiguring out some of the dynamics in her family, because she's had to put so much on hold with her family to pursue her dream. And she had a year where she was getting kind of back into her family life. So she's sort of thinking like, you know, is my dream worth giving up this time with my family? And like, do my family know how much I love them? And all of that I really enjoyed. But the hero, guys, is problematic, and it's hard because there's a lot of things that Mariana Zapata is doing in this book that I think is really good, and like what we like to see in contemporary romance, we being like my generation and younger, who are now like increasingly the ones kind of driving some of the trends in contemporary and just romance in general. You know, she talks about the difficulty of being a woman, a public figure online, and so there's some discussions of like how that's different for her versus him in terms of harassment. I think there's some really good discussions in terms of like women, how women are perceived in the media for being ambitious versus men. Like, there's some of those things going on that are really good. But then the hero is a Russian like heir to a fortune, and I just think in 2018 America that doesn't play that well, I don't think, because there's some real questions as to how he has his money, and like there's just some weirdness with Russians these days between the US and Russia. Let's just put it that way. So I think that's kind of weird. And then he's a little too old school alpha in some places. And I think he's not meant to be, I don't think the reader is supposed to be perceiving him as being what we would call an alpha hole, which is like alpha males who are so over the top they just become assholes. He has some of that behavior, and he reacts really like violently, honestly, I think, at least verbally, when she hasn't told him about this person who's harassing her online, and he gets so angry. And I think we're meant to perceive that as him being angry for her, and that that's good, but it doesn't, it's bullying, and it's not a cute look. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that there's any actual like assault or actual abuse. I just think that the behavior is aggressive and not cool, and I wish that the author had had more kind of awareness of that, and doesn't seem to be seems to be very aware of some issues that women face, but seemed to be kind of tone deaf to them when it came to some of the actions of the hero. Oh gosh, I could go into a whole tangent here. Let's just say that there's some contemporary romance is in an interesting transition period right now, I think, in terms of what kinds of heroes it has, because in old school romance, so like think the traditional bodice rippers of the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of like aggressive men who essentially were rapists, but like there was all these theories about like the reader is giving consent on behalf of the heroine, because this was a time where like women didn't feel like good girls didn't want sex, but like the heroines secretly do, so the hero is raping her but he knows she wants it, and like the reader is giving consent on behalf of the heroine, or the reader is the hero. Like there's all these literary theories about like why that was a thing, and then we kind of grew out of that old school like kind of mindset. Someone like Nora Roberts was actually a really important transition figure and kind of moving away from having these super over-the-top heroes to having much more like normal heroes and normalizing like sexual desire in women, things like that. So that was sort of the 90s and early 2000s, but really like now it's sort of this weird space where there are these tropes of these over-the-top kind of aggressive men, but they don't play the same way as they used to because the readership has a different expectation about what is and isn't acceptable behavior. So anyway, all that to say, this book just kind of raised all those questions for me. I've been talking about this for far too long. But this book like was just making me think through all of that and thinking about you know, kind of issues of, or thinking about like what is the place for sort of a very aggressive or overly protective hero in contemporary romance these days? Like, how do you do that in a way that doesn't come across as being kind of like emotionally abusive or over the top manipulative or controlling or whatever? Because I do think that women like that trope. Like, clearly that's something that resonates in terms of there's been a lot of studies in the romance, literary studies, about how women have so many things in their lives in real life that they have to choose. Like, they are in charge of all this stuff with the kids a lot of times. They're in charge of things at work. Like, they have so much going on that part of the kind of fantasy of this like alpha male is somebody who knows what you want. He is taking care of everything and you don't have to tell him what's good for you and what you want. That's kind of the fantasy. So it's interesting to see romance trying to hold on to part of that fantasy in a post-Me Too world, I guess is the bottom line here. Okay, so after that little mini thesis I had apparently about From Lukov with Love, which I did, by the way, I did ultimately enjoy. I just didn't, it just was surprising to me. Anyway, hey guys, sorry for the random footage. I just realized that I totally forgot to talk about my other surprise, which was The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. I did that as a buddy read with Beautifully Bookish Bethany and Leanna from Leanna's Library, and it was really good. I didn't like it as much as I wanted to, like, or as I thought I might, but it's really good. The way I would describe it is actually as a fantasy world in Venice that has the same kind of spirit as the Three Musketeers. It's very rompy and it has a really fun kind of ironic tone to it that I don't think you see a lot of in fantasy. It actually reminds me tonally somewhat of the Johannes Cabal books, and I love those. So I really enjoyed the tone. It does take a while to get going on the plot, but once it does, it's really, really good. So it was a surprise because I think I was envisioning more of like a heist pirate novel, and that's not quite what it is, but it is still a lot of fun and I would still recommend it. It was really good. Let's move to the disappointments, and only one, and it's not even that disappointing, and that was Windwitch by Susan Dennard. I still really liked this book. I gave it a 3 out of 5, which is like, I liked it. It was good. It just wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, and it does make me a little apprehensive about where the series is going. I'm gonna keep reading in the series for sure, and I also have Sightwitch, so I want to read that. That's a prequel. But yeah, I'm just a little, it was just a little disappointing to me. It wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. It didn't work as well for me as I wanted it to. That being said, I know that this is a book and a series a lot of people absolutely love, so this is definitely your mileage may vary. For me, I really am invested in the characters in that series, but the plot is a little meh for me at this point. That is my June 2018 wrap up. Definitely let me know if you have any thoughts about any of the books I talked about. And one housekeeping note, I am going to be, this is my last little batch of pre-filming for a while. I am going to be traveling quite a bit in July. So I'm going to do my best to keep up with comments and stuff, but if I'm a little absent, I apologize for that in advance, and just know that it's not that I'm ignoring you. I'm just running around quite a bit this month. So I appreciate your patience and grace as I move through this particular month. And like I said, I've done a lot of pre-filming, so I don't think that I'll be missing videos, but I just may not be able to be as interactive with them as I'd like to be, so just so you know. But anyway, with that being said, I would still love to hear from you guys because I would still love to read comments as I'm able to. So let me know any thoughts that you have below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, along with all the books that I mentioned today. Anyway, hope you guys are having a really great day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!